let's kick off another episode of You're All Doomed, a podcast that is working its way through Jason X, 13 minutes at a time. I am Greg, but you can call me Daddy.
And I'm Brian, and I will never call you Daddy.
And this segment begins with Jason's frozen arm and ends with the Professor and Sarge arguing in a hallway. We are in Lab 2, where attractive blonde Adrian is cutting off Jason's hockey mask with a scalpel, which is surprisingly gross. I like that it's sort of grown into his face, much like it had in the design for Jason Goes to Hell, but it's so fused to his skin that she's got to actually slice it away. She removes the mask, and we get a really good look, albeit upside down, of Jason underneath the mask. And to me, it's a neat effect. It's a nice design, but it looks a lot like the ruined Bishop android in Alien 3 when Ripley has to hook him back up in the wreckage of the escape vehicle to find out what's going on. He's got kind of this buggy left eye and battered kind of pulpy features and a perpetual sneer.
And Adrian cringes when she sees this and says, "You're one ugly motherfucker." No, she actually says, "Oh, poor baby. No wonder you wear the mask," which I thought was like a really shitty thing to say, but very appropriate.
But that's not the weirdest thing that we see, because as soon as she places the mask back on Jason's face, we cut to the professor's quarters, where he is laying on his back on the bed, wearing a diaphanous purple negligee. Janessa is on top of him, wearing a leather mama dominatrix outfit, and twisting his left nipple with the clamp that she was carrying earlier. She's yelling the word daddy a lot, as is he, until he ecstatically yells, "You pass!" I mean, I'm not here to kink shame anybody. Whatever floats your boat is cool. I'm just not sure what this scene is supposed to be communicating to us for the characters involved.
Personally, I found the shaving scene from Jason Goes to Hell to be much more erotic than this one, but I just don't understand why this is the second time in a Friday the 13th movie that we see a student trying to convince a person of authority to give them a passing grade.
That's an interesting point. The New York Post is, barely a week goes by when they don't report on some sort of teacher having sex with a student scandal. So is this trying to normalize that behavior in some way or what? But it's so cartoonish that it's not at all erotic. It's embarrassing, regardless of your bedroom predilections, which, again, to each his or her own. But this is just almost intended to be squirmy.
Yeah, that's how I saw it too. It was like, I didn't get the impression, like there's nothing that's been established in these characters in the very short time that we've known them, but there's been nothing that's shown us that either one of these characters has this like kink side of them that would be into something like this. It's totally and completely 180 from what we've seen so far. And maybe that's the point. It's just meant to be like, wow, look, these people are different than you expected. But it's just, it really does come off as more comical than sexy.
Yeah. I mean, there are some, the more I think about it, despite trying not to, there are some interesting dynamics here, because I do at least appreciate the fact that Janessa is not the one being dominated. She is very much in control of this situation, and I feel like she's manipulating the professor more than the other way around. So that's at least noteworthy. Back in Lab 2, we get a quick shot of more blood and goop dripping from Jason's body as he continues to thaw out.
What I did like about this shot is that the camera kind of pans across Jason's body as we see Adrian like working in the background, and the shot was framed like we were supposed to see some indication of life from Jason, see his chest move from breathing or like his finger twitch or something. I didn't notice anything, but it did kind of like, I had to kind of like stop what I was doing and look really closely at the screen to see if there was something that indicated that maybe he had sprung back to life.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, like, you're absolutely right, but I think they were using that shot to establish that nothing was happening with Jason yet, because we cut to another room in the ship where KM is wearing a shirt with a humorously large boob window, showing Sonoran her breasts, and one of her nipples actually falls off. It's been magnetically attached and falls to the floor, followed immediately thereafter by the other one, which I thought was pretty funny. He's obviously, trying to improve her design to make her more human-like, which leads me to my next point, which is, you've referred to her a couple of times so far as a cyborg, but I think that might be inaccurate. I get the sense that she's actually fully synthetic and is more accurately described as an android.
Oh, fuck you, nerd. Jesus.
I want to be sensitive to the correct identification, much like Bishop in Alien says, I prefer the term artificial person myself.
Fair enough. So I'm wondering, did KM ask Sonoran to give her nipples or breasts? Because if you're going to go through the trouble of giving an android breasts, why wouldn't you also give her nipples?
It's a fair question. I guess maybe it was more of a structural thing. Like, to give her female form, you give her the contours of an idealized female body, but nipples are sort of a surface decoration in this instance. Obviously, they're functional in the world, but this would be almost like an upgrade, like decals on a car or something, as far as she's concerned. Just to make her feel more human and to fit in, because we do get some really cute acting here, where she laments that she's not real like all the other girls on the ship, which Sonoran kind of dismisses. He thinks that she's perfect just the way she is. And I do like, there's a little moment where KM reacts to that praise with like, oh, well, thank you. But also like, oh, well, that's empty praise. I don't want to be perfect the way I am. I want to be, I want to be who I want to be. There was actually some layered emotion in that scene that I was kind of shocked by.
Yeah, and that's another thing that, we'll probably acknowledge as the movie goes on, but there's some really good acting in this. For a bunch of, relative unknowns, all these characters are unique and defined, and they all have some, interesting traits. And so that's really helping, like, even though there is a shitload of characters that are introduced early on, once we do start to get them alone and have them in more, like one-on-one scenes, they start to establish themselves as like, unique personalities, and a lot of them are really good.
Mm-hmm. Down the hall, we see Wilmer Valderrama and Kinsa begin their foreplay, and with a quick insert shot to Lab 2, we see this causes Jason's leg to twitch. Stoney then goes downtown on Kinsa, but not all the way. He actually begins licking her belly button. Again, I'm not here to kink shame, but no thank you. I don't want my belly button licked, nor do I want to lick anyone's belly button.
How else are you going to get the lint out?
If that's your thing, again, fine. But boy, oh boy, I see the belly button as the Sarlacc pit of bacteria of the human body.
Belly button, where?
In Lab 2, Jason then flexes his icy fist. I like that Adrian, the scientist, thinks she's hearing something and turns around a couple of times, but doesn't see any movement, so she resumes her business. But just as Stoney penetrates Kinsa, Jason sits up flat out. And, I mean, that was an impressive movement from Kane Hodder. I mean, his core muscles must be taut, because he just sat right up.
Yeah, this is a really cool scene, because when Adrian turns around to look at the examination table, Jason is no longer there. Which I can't imagine how much shit, filled her pants at that moment. But
well, they're awfully tight. We should be able to see exactly how much shit filled her pants. But
right after Adrian turns around and realizes that Jason is no longer on the examination table, he pops up behind Adrian and grabs her by the face, throwing her across the lab and against a glass wall.
And I love that there's a little nod to Aliens here, because Waylander is in the next room as Adrian is thrown up against the plexiglass, but he can't hear what's going on, much like when Ripley and Newt are trapped in the room with the facehugger.
Jason drags Adrian back to the other side of the lab, and one hand across her face and one hand across her boobs, and he maneuvers Adrian over to a sink filled with liquid nitrogen and dunks her head in it. In a pretty cool effect, her screams for help are silenced as we see her face immediately freeze. I love how the bubbles from her scream also stop as soon as her head freezes. It's really a well-done effect.
Nice. I didn't catch that. That's awesome.
Jason then removes Adrian's frozen noggin from the sink and slams it on the counter so hard that her head smashes into a million frozen red chunks.
It's a great kill. It's definitely the signature kill of this movie. In an earlier discussion years ago, you said they were ripping off T2, and I agree, but this is just such a great idea for a Jason kill that I love it. Apparently Mythbusters did an episode dedicated to this to see if it was feasible, and they determined that this is not what would happen, but I don't care. I don't want it to be realistic. I just think it's so fantastic.
And again, it goes back to what we were talking about with the special effects. For a movie that's, almost 20 years old, it looks really, really good. The whole setup, even her face going into the liquid nitrogen, you see it from, the bottom of the sink. So you're looking up, you see her screaming, her face freezes, the bubbles stop coming out of her mouth. She gets her head pulled out, and then it gets smashed, and the remains of her head, it's disgusting, but it's exactly what you'd want to see. It's just kind of like, it's like a red snow cone. It's just like chunks everywhere.
Yeah, or it looks like a geode.
Yeah.
Adrian was played by Christy Angus, who was on a sci-fi series called Andromeda that we will reference later. She was also in the movie White Chicks and appeared on a few episodes of the series Orphan Black, among many others. There's also some indication that she played an angry girlfriend in a notable Orbit gum commercial.
In terms of Adrian, the character herself, she was named after Adrian King, who played Alice in the original Friday the 13th. Her role on the ship was she was an intern working at New Harvard University on Earth 2. She's also one of the very few people to unmask Jason.
Yeah. Jason then grabs the biggest, meanest bone saw from the medical implements tray nearby and begins to prowl the corridors of the Grendel.
There's even a quick shot of him standing at the end of the hallway that, is reminiscent of a James Bond shot where he turns to the camera and walks away. It's pretty cool.
Nice.
So now that Jason is up and moving around, in the previous scene, Adrian had sliced off Jason's hockey mask with a scalpel, and she went all the way around, cutting the straps, and detached it. So when she put it back on his face, how does it stay there?
I mean, I wonder if, the flesh around the mask was so puckered that she could almost, kind of clip it back into place, and it's not as secure as it was when it was frozen, but it's whatever was holding it to his face before he was frozen.
Sort of like a suction cup on a wet surface. It's just going to be like...
Almost, yeah. Ugh.
Oh, okay. I'll buy it.
Meanwhile, the professor has wiped himself off and brings Rowan some food. We do confirm that the planet Earth has died and that everyone now lives on Earth 2. She tells the professor about how they executed Jason Voorhees the first time in 2008. via electrocution, gas, firing squad, and hanging. None of those things worked, and that's when they decided to freeze him. Rowan is then introduced to a few other members of the crew. She meets Sonoran for the first time, who I associate with Peter Parker, as that's just what I've been calling him in my mind this whole time. She meets Janessa and KM, which we learn stands for Knowledge Matrix Android. Waylander, who was Adrian's lab assistant, comes practically skipping into the room, carrying the machete, which indicates to Rowan that Jason is aboard the vessel. She is not happy.
Professor Lowe assures Rowan that Jason's in the next lab and that they're quite safe, and not to mention that their scans of him determined that he is very dead. But Rowan tries to convince Professor Lowe to get rid of them, but Professor Lowe says that that would be foolish because Jason, much like Rowan, is a valuable scientific artifact that must be preserved. And Rowan's like, actually, he's an unstoppable killing machine.
There's some decent acting by the professor here. He starts out the scene trying to display to Rowan that he's a decent guy, and he comes across as very likable and nurturing. But as soon as she begins to object to having Jason aboard, he turns into kind of a condescending worm. It's a nice change of demeanor.
Yeah, he's beginning his transformation into Paul Reiser.
Ha! Nice. Professor Lowe dismissively tells her, "Oh, he's definitely dead," to which Rowan replies, "Show me." We immediately cut to Lab 2, where we see a body bag being zipped up. It's obviously the remains of scientist Adrian, but that was a humorous scene transition. I liked that a lot.
Based on this development, Sergeant Brodsky makes an announcement that the ship is going to go on lockdown and that the grunt team is ordered to report to the weapons bay and everyone else should report to Lab 1, which is where Rowan was defrosted.
Hearing this announcement, Stoney and Kinza, having finished their lovemaking session, begin to dress, and as Stoney opens the cabin door, he is impaled through the gut by Jason's bone saw. There's a great splatter on Kinza's face from Stoney's blood, which I'm guessing is the second splatter that hits her face in the last 30 minutes.
Oh.
Stoney, who was apparently Janessa's brother, which I didn't know.
Oh, really?
Yeah, according to the list of characters, Stoney was played by Yanni Gelman. He started out his career on episodes of Goosebumps and Animorphs, which we will hear repeatedly throughout this season. He also appeared in the Lizzie McGuire movie, Pretty Little Liars, the recent show, as well as the 90210 reboot. But surprisingly, he was also in 47 Meters Down.
I saw that too, and we watched that recently, and granted, I wasn't looking for him, but I certainly didn't recognize him.
I mean, was he like maybe one of the guys that convinces the girls to go on the boat?
That's what I was thinking. Is maybe
like they meet the local guys or something.
Yeah, like the dive crew. That's the only thing I could think of because there are not a lot of characters in that movie,
right?
Unless he was playing one of the sharks. Jason then grabs Stoney's limp body by the hair and drags him out of the room, but for some reason he doesn't kill Kinza, which is a very unorthodox approach that Jason's taking here. Mm-hmm. He has a victim cornered in a room, and he decides that he's not going to do anything about it.
Very good point.
We get a quick shot of the weapons room where a bunch of nondescript soldiers are trying to look busy. One of them, his name's Sergeant Kicker, radios up to Sergeant Brodsky to tell him that Dallas is a no-show. So we cut upstairs to see Sergeant Brodsky, who's really pissed that Dallas is a no-show. Kinza comes stumbling down the hall. She's covered in Stoney's blood and says that...
Among other things.
Kinza with her wet belly button. Sergeant Brodsky radios down to Kicker and tells him he wants everyone ready with full armor and tack, and he wants nothing left of Jason by the time they reach Solaris. But I thought they were heading to Earth 2. Electric Boogaloo. But regardless, Lowe is not thrilled with Brodsky's orders to destroy Jason and tells him that he wants him preserved. But Brodsky's a badass motherfucker and isn't about to take no shit from Lowe, so he tells him to take all of his students to Lab 1 and wait there until he hears back from him.
We then find ourselves in a weird paintball course. There's black lighting and lots of scaffolding. We see a soldier who we learn is Dallas stalking around hunting something. and then confronts a giant lizard monster blowing its head off. He crouches behind some obstructions and is about to get munched by another monster when that creature is blown away by Azrael, who we met earlier. It turns out that they're playing some sort of shoot-'em-up competition in the ship's holodeck. Another monster appears, only to be hacked from behind by Jason. He marches towards Dallas and Azrael, but they think it's part of the simulation. Azrael keeps telling the computer to pause play. Jason takes a swipe at Azrael and decapitates Dallas, but it turns out that they're both just digital avatars. The holodeck disengages, revealing the two players in the real world sitting on the floor with their VR hookups. Jason grabs Azrael by the neck and is shot in the kidney by Dallas, who is hoping to free his friend from Jason's clutches. Jason chucks Azrael to the floor and then marches towards the soldier, who takes 2 more shots, but is interrupted when Azrael then jumps on Jason's back, preventing the soldier from firing any more shots at Jason. Jason swings Azrael around and cracks his back over Jason's knee, but on the side of the boy's body, it's pretty brutal, and then tosses his lifeless form to the ground. It's a great stunt.
It really is.
Azrael was played by Dov Tiefenbach, who was also in episodes of Goofs, Bumps, and Animorphs. His first movie role was in Tommy Boy, the Chris Farley David Spade classic. He then went on to appear as the hippie drug dealer in Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle. These days, he's an acting coach and has worked with Zoe Kravitz, among many other people. Interestingly, though, Jason X is not mentioned on his website, which I think is a mistake, because he actually did some good acting in this movie. When he was doped up and saying hello to his own disembodied arm, it was humorous. I mean, it was and convincing for, as silly as it was. I mean, why not put that on your resume?
Yeah, he's basically the Seth Green of this movie, and there's nothing to be ashamed of.
Jason then grabs Dallas by the head and slams him into the wall face first, twice. Dallas was played by Todd Farmer, the screenwriter of this movie, who also wrote My Bloody Valentine 3D, as well as Drive Angry.
Do you have any interest in virtual reality? There's a lot of cool things out there. Both you and I play, video games to some degree, and it seems like the virtual reality is kind of like that next evolution of it. I know that there's a really cool, like, first-person Star Wars game where you can go around, chopping people up with a lightsaber or shooting people. There's flight simulators. I heard that there's even a version of virtual reality where you and other people with the same headsets can create a movie theater lobby where you can invite your friends to actually watch a movie with you. So like you could, if you look straight ahead, the movie you're watching is projected on the screen, and you turn to your left and there's your virtual reality Greg, and you turn to your right and there's your other virtual reality buddy. So like things like that make it sound like, maybe, this is something I should check out.
I like the concept of it. And I think that once it's flawless, completely convincing technology, I'll be all for it. You and I are old enough that we've been hearing about virtual reality for 30 years now. I mean, one of the last movies we saw at the Kenwood Twin was Disclosure, which had an extended sequence of Michael Douglas in a virtual reality file hunting scene, trying to uncover evidence against Demi Moore. And it was goofy and hacky.
Why did we go see Disclosure together?
Who knows? Maybe we thought we'd see Demi Moore and, maybe see her butt or something. I don't know. But, then there was around the same time that like Nintendo released the Virtual Boy, which was just about the shittiest piece of video game hardware ever created. So, I mean, it's a buzzword that we've been hearing for a long, long time, and I've yet to be convinced by it. But, in theory, sure. I mean, I'd love to play a virtual reality Friday the 13th game, for God's sake.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Yeah. Yeah, but truthfully, I feel like virtual reality would probably make me barf.
Yeah.
If there was just like too much movement and, just too much immersion in the environment, I just feel like I would just start to get a headache and just want to throw up eventually.
Yeah, I mean, it would have to be so seamless as to convince your body that you are in that environment. If there's any sense of peripheral vision of the real world around you, or even just black, and so you're only seeing a small window of whatever, virtual environment you're supposed to be in, I think that would definitely make me motion sick. This would almost have to be like a holodeck room where you are surrounded by images that are so convincing that your body thinks you're there. I don't think you can have like a headset or something that would prevent me from barfing too. Agreed. The segment ends with Brodsky and Professor Lowe in the hall continuing to argue about whether or not to wait until they reach Solaris to deal with Jason. The death count in this episode is 4. We say farewell to Adrian, Stoney, Azriel, and Dallas.
If you're interested in learning more about my favorite nipple adhesive, tune in next week to another episode of You're All Doomed.